This is Jeffrey Tucker at the Mises Institute. I'm sitting here with Jeffrey Herbener of Grove City College. He's agreed to talk to us about a couple of chapters from this book, Economics in One Lesson, our new edition. So the topic we're discussing now concerns public works and taxes.
And taxes.
Okay,
right.
so let's talk about the first chapter. It's public work.
Right. So in this chapter, what Hazlitt does is develop a sort of extended argument about public works. He says, look, many people say the justification for public works isn't the grandeur of the thing that's produced. It's that it provides employment. So we can justify the building of a bridge or building of streets or buildings and so on the grounds that this provides employment to people. And of course, the point he's making is that this is always diversion, right? We're simply diverting employment from one area to another precisely because the expenditures to build the public works require taxation. And so we're just funneling, right, shifting the resource use. And again, this basic notion of scarcity and the reallocation of things is totally lost on non-economists or those who aren't introduced to economic reasoning.
Right.
And so it's a wonderful point.
So this was 1946. And very fresh in his mind is the experience of the New Deal and World War II. And this is a very common argument.
It is very common. He gives the example the TVA, one of the public works projects of that he uses to illustrate his point.
He talks about the grandeur of the wonderful
the dams and all the things, wonderful things generated from this electricity.
And this is what you see.
This is what you see, but you do not see the diversion, right? What it's been diverted from.
Yeah.
And of course, he doesn't really, to make his point, this is the beauty of Hazlitt's writing, he doesn't really have to go deeply into the sort of theoretical background, what's behind the weighing of the different values of things that are produced in one area of the economy relative to another, in order to drive this point home. So you don't find extended discussions about entrepreneurial calculation and how a profit has to be the test of whether or not the thing is justified and so on and so forth to see that he's right about this.
Yeah, and yet it does strike you as somewhat absurd that bureaucrats could decide, we need an enormous dam over there that way.
That's right.
We need a highway here.
That's right.
I mean, how do we know these things?
Yeah.
How do we know?
Yeah, but he raises this question, and he sort of his rhetoric is sort of we always dwell just only upon the thing that we see, and we ignore the thing that we do not see. What happens to our analysis if we include the thing we do not see?
Right.
And he just leaves it at that point. Right?
Now it's not so much an argument you hear these days, is it, that public works are necessary to employ people? You don't hear it that much.
No.
You do sometimes. It's more sector specific, like, well, here's a population that's sort of distressed in some way. But it's not a macro.
No, you're right about that. Yeah, like you said before, it's in the context of the Depression.
Yeah.
And he's thinking about
it's because unemployment is so low now.
Right.
And yet, the magazines and newspapers are filling up now with the news of the impending movement towards national service. Right?
Very true.
Yeah. And so the idea is that you just enslave people between the age of 18 and 20, or 21 or 22. But you have to, and I guess this argument in some way impacts on this, doesn't it? Leaving aside human rights considerations.
Yeah, right. Yes, there's the mundane economic aspect.
So apply it to that.
So that would be the diversion again, right? So we see what the public service would be done by this conscripted labor, but we don't see the value of the alternative. And of course, when we think more deeply about it, we realize that, again, here's a question of entrepreneurship, of the individual's entrepreneurial choice to say, I, in my own mind, can weigh these alternatives. Should I, work in a soup kitchen for the summer? Should I volunteer for the Peace Corps? Should I go into business and become an entrepreneur? Should I go to a graduate school and extend my education and so on,
Right.
that the individual person is perfectly capable of making this decision based upon his own entrepreneurial abilities.
Can you imagine what it will mean for national productivity, if you care about that kind of thing, to rob the economy of 2 or 3 years
It's amazing.
of young people's lives,
Yeah.
get them away from webmastering and
Right.
gaining skills in the private sector?
No, it's
and have
horrible.
them doing what?
Yeah, who knows what, right?
That's
who knows
the
what?
scary part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what? It could be anything. It's
Right,
whatever
right.
whatever the politicians dream up.
Dream
right?
up, and they dream a lot.
Yeah,
They all have a dream.
they'll become spies. that's the idea. To make sure we support Homeland Security or whatever the thing is. Now, the next chapter deals with taxes, and it's a topic on which you've written. The title is "Taxes Discourage Production," which, once you hear those 3 words, it sounds unobjectionable, and yet it requires some fleshing out, doesn't it?
Right, and what Hazlitt says in this chapter is, again, the repetition or application of the basic lesson. So, yes, so we have this case, where the subsidy is provided to someone and everybody says hurrah and look at the wonderful thing that's been done by the state and how it's benefited the recipient, person A, let's say. But they totally ignore, they realize that taxes have been raised to pay for this, but they ignore the effect on the behavior of B, the state of condition that B is in, right? They dwell upon the condition of A, the allegedly improved condition of A. Yeah. And so he simply says, well, look, let's consider this. What happens when you tax the productivity of the productive output of someone? Well, they're not going to just sit still for this, right? This changes their behavior. Just like the subsidy changes the behavior of A, presumably for the better, but not obviously necessarily.
Now, why can't you just say, well, actually, when you tax people, it's true that it takes away some of their money, but that fact alone encourages people to work even more, so become even more productive, to make up for the difference.
Yeah, people do kind of try to claim this, but of course, this is sort of a confusion of the notion of productivity, right? What exactly do we mean by productivity? We're producing value. Okay, so what is the value that we're producing? Who decides on what is a valuable thing to be produced? And of course, this is the producer. This is Hazlitt's point, right? What's being produced is what the producer himself deems to be valuable. And so if he's, he runs a business and he's not being taxed, or he's being taxed lightly, and so he's producing goods in his business and selling them. Okay, so he's choosing this as the valuable alternative, and he's having it ratified by the purchase of the consumers and so on. So if he's taxed and he does something else, so now he lessens his productivity in this area, and instead he paints or whatever, then, of course, this is something that he himself deems less valuable. He's doing this only as, again, a diversion of, and so his productivity is diverted. If he works harder in his business to produce extra income to make up for this, he once again is diverting, right, from things that he personally considers more valuable into
leisure
less value.
Time.
So the objective features of what he does in his action aren't definitive in determining what is production or what is productivity. This can only be determined in the value sense. And this is what's being diverted.
Well, so why isn't it a good argument then to say, let's not tax productivity, let's tax consumption?
Right. Well, this is Rothbard's great contribution, right, in tax incidence theory, where he pointed out that all taxes are, in fact, income taxes. So if you tax consumption, that tax gets imputed back to production. In other words, a businessman who...
You mean all taxes are taxes on production?
On production, what did I say?
Income.
Well, they're...
Same thing.
Okay. Well, in the context of our discussion, we can treat that as the same thing. Yeah, they're taxes on wealth, or things produced, right? Okay, so the idea would be if you tax consumption, you have a sales tax, or you have a general sales tax, or an excise tax, or something like this, that once again, it's the entrepreneur who decides how to adjust to this. He isn't a passive recipient of the taxation or payer of it. He adjusts his production. What he does, of course, is of necessity, since his costs are raised by the taxes, he has to lower his costs in other areas. This means lessening his demand for labor, shrinking back his capital expenditures, and so on. So this falls upon someone's income. Some producer's productivity is impacted by this.
Yeah. So there's no way to tax
No, that's right.
consumption.
No,
really.
Consumption cannot be taxed.
It can't be taxed.
No, it can't be. Only things produced, only wealth, only income.
But it's often said that, well, if we tax, put a sales tax on beer or cigarettes or whatever the thing happens to be, then the producer's not paying, and it's only the consumer, and then that becomes voluntary, because then you can choose not to purchase it. And this is a very...
Yeah, I once had this conversation actually at an academic conference with I had presented something on taxation, and I was making this previous point that we made about taxes being imputed backwards, and he said, no, he made exactly your point, right? No, wait a minute, isn't this just sort of voluntarily paid by the consumer? And I said, sure, right, this is Rothbard's point too, right? A consumer voluntarily pays the full price, and all the costs of production, including taxes, are taken out of this, so to speak, or covered by that revenue for the entrepreneur. It's the entrepreneur who's being coerced. Yeah. He's the one who is fills the hand of the state, pressing upon him to take his income.
Right.
And then his behavior changes.
So
without the hand of the state here, his production decisions are different, and prices are mitigated, and supplies are increased, and incomes are higher, and so on.
Yeah. Now, whenever I've... well, let me ask you this. When you present to your students various arguments about the impact of taxes on economic growth, does anybody ever raise their hand and say, well, Professor Herbener, how do you propose taxes be structured in a way that will not be damaging?
Right. In fact, I teach the course in public finance at Grove City College. And so I kind of avoid this this line of questioning by beginning at the very starting point of analysis, to take students through step by step, the production on the market and so on and so forth, and then the theories of market failure and what have you, so that by the time we get to the point where we're discussing the taxation and the transfers of resources, they've been disabused of the notion that, look, the government has to have a certain tax base in order to provide this or that particular good or set of goods, because these are public goods, or the market has failed here, and there's an externality, and something has to be done by the state.
But at least when if you're going to impose a tax, at least be aware of the cost. Right?
Right. And it is true that there are perhaps taxes, one could say that the extent to which a tax is neutral is not the same for every tax. Yeah. Right? So Rothbard himself points out that this is one of the strikes against income taxes. Yeah. Income taxes tend to, in practice, actually be less neutral, because there's more revenue taken by the state than, say, an excise tax or a tariff or something like this, right?
And it's fascinating how our public policy ethos seems to recognize the truth of what Hazlitt is saying. Whenever you have proposals from the left and the right for so-called tax holidays.
Yes, that's right. Suddenly.
Isn't it strange?
Yeah. Suddenly our eyes are open.
Yeah. Let's have a tax holiday. Oh, that'll be great for business.
Yeah.
It's funny. Why don't we just make it everywhere? Right? Yeah, permanent all over the whole country. Yeah. And reading through the chapter, is it your sense that the theoretical apparatus of economics that he's addressing here, the fallacies that he's addressing, do they seem like they've changed that much over the 60 years?
No, I don't think so.
No, they haven't changed much.
I think they're very simple. No, they haven't changed.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the same fallacy over and over again.
I get that impression from the whole book.
Right. Right.
He seems to have picked out a whole series of issues that seem to be
timeless, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, timeless. Universal fallacies held by all people at all times and all places. Yeah. Well, thank you for helping us unravel some of these today.
Thank you, Jeff.